Hey, it's Matt Pinfield. You know me from 120 Minutes and many other things over the years. But you're watching one of my favorite shows. It's Good Company with Scott Ball.
Good company!
Hey guys, my name's Scott Bowling and you're watching Good Company. Today I have the man, Mr. Matt Pinfield.
Thank you, Scott.
Dude.
Good to see you, man. Thank you. It's
so
very
much.
kind of you. Thanks for having me
I've
here.
literally grown up watching you on TV. So I remember setting my VHS, I'm fanboying out right now.
That's all right.
to
I'm actually very flattered.
I had
That's
my VHS tape player set up to record 120 minutes a night.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I couldn't stay up. I mean, it was so late at night, you know.
It wasn't,
Yeah,
and a lot of times your parents too would be like,
Parents just
you should be in
understand,
bed,
man.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of people, I think, watch them Mondays after school, which was a cool thing, you know?
And so going back, I mean, how long have you started off being on the radio, and how old were you when you started radio?
You know, it's
Didn't
funny.
you use pirate?
Yeah. Well, if I was so young back then. I think I was around 9 or 10. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a disc jockey. I loved rock and roll so much, and like rock and roll of the 60s and 70s. And I was, I would listen to these DJs, and I would sometimes befriend them and call them on the phone. There was one guy, this guy Rich Phoenix, who, let me come visit him when I was 10 years old in the studio and watch him do his radio show, which was such a big deal for me. But my dad was, he was very good at science, and we found this very inexpensive science fair kind of kit to build an AM transmitter in the basement. So I was doing radio shows out of my parents' basement, literally running a wire up through the TV antenna so you can get, it was coming out the wall and going up to the top on the roof, which was pretty crazy. And we thought we were great because we could broadcast a block.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Literally, it was a block. We're like, you go down there with your radio and see how far you can listen to us. You know what I mean? So me and my friends, we were doing radio shows there, and a couple beat up turntables, an old Radio Shack mixer, and it was fun. So it was stuff that we used to like to do. And then I did a pledge drive, when I was 16 to do radio at the local college where I ended up doing radio for a long time at Rutgers University. And my friends in school were like, let's pledge. So I went on the air for 2 hours and played all kinds of cool stuff. And they were looking at me going, dude, you can actually do this, as a kid. So
who influenced you when you were on the radio? I mean, what people were you listening to?
There were so many people, back in those days that were on the radio in New York and Philadelphia. I mean, that's because I lived right in the central New Jersey area. So I would listen to, the people that were on WNEW FM, like Scott Muni, who, has a long history with John Lennon and the Beatles. And, it was just really, it's kind of funny because I ended up working with pretty much all those guys, the ones who were still alive, through Sirius XM over the years, including this guy, Cousin
cool.
Brucey, who was like on the radio, when I was 4, 5, 6. And just, meeting all these guys that I listened to as a kid and
that's a
women
trip.
was really cool, yeah.
Yeah, so you did radio for a while, and then what made you decide to get on screen? I mean, this happened in the 80s, right?
It did. Well, what happened was when MTV, when it came about, I was already one of those guys, like who, whenever rock and roll was on TV, you'd watch it. So like when I was very young, there was Don Kirshner's rock concert, which was on Saturday nights, and then there was a Midnight Special, which was also on late Friday nights, and even ABC had a show called In Concert, where they'd show Alice Cooper or David Bowie full concert, bleeping some words, but it was really, really cool. And so, I always loved as a kid when I was growing up, there weren't as many visuals. There were certain TV shows where artists would perform on. So when MTV came about, I was like, God, this is great, man. I can see videos. So we would just, same thing you were doing, but I was doing, we were taping VHSs of all the videos to find like the best like rock stuff and things that we liked, whether it was, soul or R&B. We're looking through that. And it was something that I never actually really saw myself doing, to be honest with you. It's a crazy thing. I loved that I knew I could do something like that and would love the opportunity, but never thought the opportunity would come along, to be honest with you. So I was just grateful to be doing radio. So I was doing college radio at the time, and then there was a radio station that opened on the Jersey Shore, near where I lived. There was a rock station, and it was kind of freeform. We were allowed to play a lot of whatever we wanted, but it was still a commercial radio station, meaning it had people bought ads and And so being there and doing that radio thing, and then DJing in rock clubs, like I used to DJ in rock and alternative clubs.
Yes.
I did that for like 13 years. I mean, that's, so I'd be out spinning in nightclubs for like 3 or 4 nights a week.
Yeah.
So I was doing whatever it took, My first radio job, I was on the radio weekends, so, and, I was making, very little money, but I didn't care. I just loved what I did. I just wanted to do it. I mean, so when I got the first job, I had to do as many other jobs as I could. So whether that was taxi dispatching, DJing in clubs 4 nights a week, you know what I mean? I would DJ in people's weddings and parties, and I would do
paying your dues, kind of
whatever.
thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I was grateful to do it. I was good. I was happy to have the opportunity. So this radio station on the Jersey Shore was like one of the first, like 15 alternative radio stations in the country. And at that point, things were really starting to happen and bubble under. I mean, there was already. I started there doing that in about '84 on weekends for a long time. But then as things started to happen with Seattle and grunge and the alternative world starting to go into the mainstream, I took over running the radio station. So that was when, everything was starting to explode. And because the station was inspiring a lot of people, and the people that worked at MTV in the music department, which is, where I would, of course, want to work, because it's basically, MTV was, the biggest, you could say, top radio station in the country, because it was one place where people would go before there were so many other places. So having the opportunity to program there, it was something that was a dream for me. So I was working at this radio station. I was running the station for quite a few years in New Jersey, and I'd kind of taken it as far as I could take it, but I loved it there and loved what I was doing. But, I had a daughter, and I was still doing the nightclubs. Like, I was running this radio station and still DJing nightclubs 4 nights a week. So I was working, running the station, doing an afternoon air shift, doing all that. So, when an opportunity came along, it turned out the MTV people were, like, tracking music with me. So they would hear the radio station broadcast over the Atlantic Ocean to Lower Manhattan or Long Island or those areas.
Yeah.
And so they love the station. So they would call me up and go, "Hey, is that record real? Like, do people really like that, or am I just
getting your advice?"
Yeah, they wanted the advice because a lot of times they were being hyped on records.
Yeah.
Like everybody would tell them, "This is the greatest new thing and it's doing really well," and they just wanted an honest read, which I gave them.
That's a pretty cool compliment, though. Like,
it is.
People are relying on what you have to say, feedback-wise. That's awesome.
I was very grateful, And then the crazy thing that happened was Dave Kendall, who was hosting 120 Minutes, I opened up a radio trade at the radio station. I saw that he was leaving the show. So I called up my friend from MTV there in the music department and said, what happened with Dave Kendall? He goes, "Oh, well, he got blown out." But I go, "Well," and I was very naive. This was not a matter of arrogance. I was just really naive, and I just sat, it came out of my mouth. I just said, "You guys should have somebody like me host that show who, like, the artist will respect and knows about the music." And he goes, "Well, I don't know if they're going to think you're still in the demo." Like, I was too old already. This is the funniest thing in the world before I even started working there full time. He goes, "But I'll get back to you in like a week." The phone rings an hour later, and he says, "Oh, the bosses want you to come in and audition." So I thought, that means that'll happen in like a week. It didn't, because, the rock shows were never, like, Headbangers and 120 Minutes were never the priorities that they should have been. They knew how important they were as brands.
Yeah.
But, when it came to, like, having me come in to audition, they finally got it sorted out like a month later. I went in. I was like a deer in headlights, because I'd never been in front of a camera before. Like, it was one of those things. And I was a bit cottonmouth. I remember.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, I was nervous.
Yeah.
I was definitely nervous.
Yeah.
And I was nervous, and I had, like, dry mouth, and you're supposed to talk about yourself. So I was, talking about, my history in alternative music and rock, and then they had me do, like, some, like, throw-tos for videos, some samples. And I did it, and all of a sudden, there was this, 1 week that Depeche Mode were coming in, and at this point, they were having, like, artists fill in on 120 Minutes, but it wasn't really working out that well. I mean, sometimes they'd be great, and other times, making music is really their thing. So they weren't, TV wasn't as natural, and they really didn't want to do it. So they might have seemed a little inept in front of the camera. But so they said, "Look, Depeche Mode are coming in. Here's your shot to come in and do this show." So I'm like, "Okay, great." So I'll go in, and I'm pretty, I'm also a bit nervous and stiff that day. I won't lie. My first show that I did on the air. The crazy thing about that was Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode was great. Like, he was the singer. He was being really good. And Martin Gore, the guy who does the music and writes it, he was like out of it. Because a lot of times these artists would come in, like I found this out later as I was hosting the shows. They'd come in and they'd fly in from England and they go out the night before and they get all rocked out and fucked up the night before. And then they'd have to shoot like the next morning or the next day.
Right?
Early. Yeah. And they would like, they'd be basically zombies or just like so jet lagged. But I remember I'm sitting there like you and I are. So I'm sitting here like across from you. And Dave Gahan's, I'm engaging him. I'm trying to talk to him and he's being really good. And then I'm looking at Martin Gore, and I'm just like, my mind is going, you're going to kill this job for me before it even starts. Please engage me. Like, I was just like, literally, I was like, I kept going, and Dave was great, and then eventually, but he was like, off like this, Martin. And then eventually, I'd get him like to come back into the conversation. Well, they said it went really well. The people that were in charge there, they liked it. I remember the woman called me up, who was an English woman named Lauren Levine, who was the head of the VJs, and she goes, you did a great job with Martin Bohr, because she called him a bore, which was like, I remember her saying that, and he's not a bore. He's actually, the funny story is that it comes full circle. I love Martin, and, we became friends after that. I've done a lot of work with Depeche Mode over the years, and I always bust his balls. I'm like, dude, you almost killed my fucking, do you realize you almost killed my career? Which I always say to him,
What does he say when you ask
him? He laughs about it. He thinks it's funny. Yeah, he's totally cool. He gets it. He goes, he always apologizes, but
I wish this existed on YouTube, like this video you're talking about.
Yeah, which is crazy. I know there's some of the stuff is out there, but so, I go back and I'm still running the radio station, and I'm sitting there not necessarily knowing, what the future's going to hold me at MTV. And, I love what I'm doing, on the radio station. I won a couple of these national radio awards. They were called the Gavins, and for Music Director of the Year. And, I was very grateful. I think when I first became music director there, I got the opportunity to talk to people in the business. Mm-hmm. So then people knew, they were like, I think they, just like you are, you love music so much. They were like, wow, they go, here's a guy who is looking for reasons to play bands, not to play them. Because, a lot of radio people are like, they want to be naysayers and just be gatekeepers, and they won't give, certain bands airplay or a chance depending on, their structure. But for me, I loved giving bands a break and helping out bands get from point A to point B. Yeah. So they're calling me in for a meeting, and I go to New York City, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're bringing me in. If they're bringing me in, maybe I got the show. Like, it could be, maybe it's gonna happen, And I remember I go in and I sit with Andy Schoen, who's one of the most important people in my life, because he really gave me my break there. And also at Farm Club, he was like one of the head guys at Farm Club, and I love Andy. But I remember sitting in front of his desk in the office, and he goes, listen, Matt, we thought you were great. He goes, but we're gonna have Louis Largent, my friend Louis, who was a VP of music programming there. He used to be at K-Rock in LA. He goes, we're gonna have Louis do the show, but we're gonna use you as a backup, when Louis can't do it, but we just wanna let you know how much we appreciated it. And as great as it was to hear that, I was, my heart still sunk to my shoes.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I had to leave MTV and go do another interview for like a band from Scotland called the Waterboys, and do an interview for for Geffen Records to put a CD promo. And I just remember going, pull your shit together, man, and keep your chin up. You're gonna be all right. And advice I always give people, after that, because one of the things is, you're in your hometown, your home area. So they had been all over the newspapers that I was filling in there, and all the press in New Jersey and everywhere. And because they did say to me they would use me as a fill-in, when people were like, so what happened? I'm like, well, they're gonna use me as a fill-in. So even though at least I had something to tell them while I waited. And so what I always tell people to do is I explain that I think it's so important that you let people know that you're there. And that doesn't mean harass the shit out of people, but you know what I'm talking about? Like, the thing that I did when people ask me, well, how did you eventually end up back on MTV and working for them? I said, you know what I did? I called Andy Schoen, who was like the head of music and talent. I'd leave him a message. It was before cell phones. Once a month, I would just make sure that he saw my name on his call log. Yeah. I never took it personally because, I knew guy's running MTV. He's a busy dude. But I just made sure that I left a message. And then eventually, there were 3 people leaving music department. So I got an interview, and I ended up
persistent, but you weren't over persistent.
Yeah, which was great, but I wasn't over persistent. We're like, because I see sometimes people get frustrated when they can't get in touch with people, and they get like resentful, and I'm like, "No, you just never know what's going on in somebody else's life. Not only how busy they are, if they have something personal happening, don't take it personal when they don't get back to you immediately. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So eventually, you don't think you have the job, and then they call you back, right?
Yeah, well, the crazy thing is, so like 5 months later, they call me back, and I never actually think I'm going to be on television again. The truth is, the job offer was to be in the music department, to be actually helping pick videos and being there working on, the MTV Unplugs and the storytellers for VH1, all this stuff. So I didn't really think I was going to be on television again. And one thing I did not want them to think was that I had a hidden agenda to be a host. So I remember I stayed on the air for 8 hours on the radio station after I told everybody I was leaving for MTV to work full time. So I did like an 8-hour radio show that day on the Jersey Shore. Like I did my shift and then another one. So I just stayed on for 8 hours and played like all this great music. Because I thought it was going to be my last hurrah on radio. And at this point, here I am. I get home and I'm sitting in my kitchen, and I'm just like, I got that, there's a bittersweet feeling because I'm certainly grateful I'm going to get this opportunity to work at MTV and work in the music department, behind the scenes, but I'm not going to be doing the radio show anymore. So that's like a little sad, but you just got to make certain moves in your life and take a chance. And I went there and I worked in the music department, and then eventually they, 4 or 5 months go by, and they go to me, "Hey, you're pretty good that time on the air. We're going to give you 3 weeks, okay, to do this show because Oasis are coming in, and they don't want to host. So we'll let you know how it goes after 3 weeks." So after the first day with Oasis, the woman came up to me, Lauren Levine, and goes, "I did a 180. You should be doing the show every week," and that's when it started. So, but I mean, I went in there I didn't have that expectation. I never expected to be on TV again, let alone radio, and and it turned into something I could have never predicted. So I'm very grateful for it,
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I miss those days of MTV having like the videos where you tuned in, you don't have a source like the internet where you can find anything.
Yeah.
Just like you relied on that. Like I was saying earlier, like I had to like record that stuff just to watch it,
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
to see it at all.
Yeah, and I think that was a cool thing for the time. I think it was really important. I'm grateful that my life's journey has taken me through that period because, I'll talk to people like you, Scott, who are big music fans, and now you're doing your own show, and like I'll talk to other people that are working doing a show or working in the music business or DJing or are musicians who say it was such an important part of their lives. And I'm so grateful when I hear that because, I'm glad that there was that moment in time that it was for quite a few years where MTV was that influential and that important, you know what I mean? And I think the important thing is, always to remain humble and just do what you love, but appreciate people. And like I said, always treat people the way you want to be treated.
That's wise, man. Thank you. Yeah,
so,
that's awesome.
But that's great.
And in that time frame, I'm just going to bring this up, but Marilyn Manson, I remember when you interviewed him.
Yeah.
I don't know, you've interviewed him multiple times, but I was probably 15 when you did that.
Yeah.
What was that like interviewing somebody like Marilyn Manson? You don't know what to expect. It's the uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing about Marilyn was I was already friends with Trent Reznor. Like he and I had known each other since Pretty Hate Machine came out. Even before. We met when they were giving out cassettes at the New Music Seminar of had like a whole Sin and I think Down in It. And the only time, it was like a 4-song cassette sampler with the 4 Nine Inch Nails songs on both sides of the cassette.
Wow.
So they were giving them out to people that were at this thing, and Trent was there, and we became friendly. And then all of a sudden, Pretty Hate Machine blew up. And then, Trent was the one who told me about Marilyn. So Marilyn was a character, but the bottom line is that Marilyn's got a good heart. He's always been such a cool guy. And we were pretty wild, as it says in the book. We misbehaved quite a bit. Yeah, we did a lot of partying back in those days.
So when you worked with MTV in 120 Minutes, how much time did you have to prepare for these interviews? Were they like, they give you a schedule of like, you're going to interview this guy on this day?
Yeah, we would usually, because I was in the music department too, we would usually know who's coming in advance, and I would make sure that I listened to records and,
that's good.
Always, there was no internet then, but because I was such a music fanatic like you are, because you love music so much.
Absolutely.
You know, I would know enough about their stuff historically and then find out what's going on the new records. But that's how I would prepare because, you know, I think it's real important that you literally, every interview that you've got to be prepared for the best you can. And I've had to do interviews, it's really weird, where I know you don't know anything and it's just like, it's thrust upon you. It's happened to me before. Funniest story in the world with Duran Duran where like came in for Rio, and I was this kid in school, you know, so I was like in college, so I went with a tape recorder to EMI Records in New York, and Simon Le Bon and Nick Rhodes had just gotten back from shooting the Hungry Like the Wolf video, and they're
so cool.
all sunburnt, and they're like lobsters, they're in pain, and they walk into this room, and they have a beta big tape of the Hungry Like the Wolf video just edited, and it's me and the two of them and the guy from EMI just sitting there, and we watched the video, and I knew enough about Duran Duran to do a good interview with him at that point, I mean, because I already had the first album, but Rio was where he exploded. But there was a band in the next room, and I remember the person from EMI going, "Hey Matt, I have another interview for you to do in the next room," and I'm like, "Okay, who's that?" He goes, "This band Missing Persons," and it was you know, that new wave band, like it was Dale Bozio was the lead singer, but I knew the drummer used to play with Frank Zappa and was in a band called UK, who were like a progressive rock band. So when I found out it was Terry Bozzio, I just kind of started there and then like let them talk about, you know. So there was no prep at all, but you know, but it was still a pretty cool moment.
That's cool,
you know, and
man.
you gotta be able to fly by the seat of your pants sometimes, you know.
Okay, so after 120 minutes, that runs its course, and then you start Farm Club.
Yeah, Farm Club was amazing. You know, I was working at MTV for all those years, and then what happened was Andy Schoen had already left, the guy who hired me at MTV. So Jimmy Iovine, you know, who everybody knows, they've probably seen him in the HBO The Defiant Ones.
Great documentary.
Yeah, great documentary.
Yeah.
And there's a very small, short clip from Farm Club of me and Dre and Eminem on stage that's in that fourth episode. But, you know, Jimmy and Doug Morris had this idea. They wanted to do this show. They wanted to do something with social media before social media existed. I mean, it was really the idea that they had was, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a record label. We're going to have a TV show, and we're going to, what was this, a record label, TV show, and a website. That was what it was.
Yeah.
And so, but they wanted to like call it Farm Club because they thought it was a great way to farm for new talent. And they thought, well, we should do this now and do something like that. So it was pretty amazing because everybody was flying by the seat of their pants. It was like a startup company, but it was backed by Universal. The thing was, nobody had broadband then really, or other ways to stream. So people had to be like kind of tech savvy to get their bands uploaded onto the site.
Napster started around that time, right?
It was Napster was happening at the same time. So you got Napster here, and then you have us. And farmclub.com, the idea was, here's going to be a place for new young talent to like upload their music, and we'll fly them in to Hollywood, and then we'll have them like play on a stage at Universal Studios. It's a rotating stage. It was unbelievable. It was like an award show every week. And I remember I'm sitting there with this woman named Audrey Morrissey who directed it, who went on to, now she directs The Voice. That's her show, you know? So we're sitting in my hotel, and she goes, well, what kind of things do you want to do? And we're on Sunset Boulevard. There's a hotel called the Mondrian, and we're just in my room talking. She goes, well, you know, we're going to have these people. It'd be great if you go and, like, surprise them, almost like Publishers Clearinghouse. Like, I show up there at their house and let them know they're going to be on TV. And then I said to Audrey, I remember going, you know, it'd be really cool, though, if we, like, even go shoot their families and where they work and where they rehearse. So nobody on TV was doing it at that point. So we were literally
like
the first
before
TV
American
show.
Idol, like
before
American Idol,
before like even like The Biggest Loser, all these shows which do what they call packages on the contestants. We were the first ones to do that on these unsigned artists, and we actually came up with the concept. I'm not saying somebody else wouldn't have come up with it at another time, but we were the first ones to do it. You know what I mean?
I always like, I didn't mean to cut you off, I always love when you guys interviewed Stereo Mud, because I'm friends with Corey and them. And you guys went to their hometown and filmed it. That was awesome.
The best. It was so much fun for me, and I love that. That was so much fun. Like I loved going to like Mitchell, South Dakota, and Fort Lauderdale or Marietta. You know what I mean? Just wherever.
What a job,
It was just so much fun. It was wonderful. It was a beautiful thing to do, and
And this is way before streaming and before the internet kind of blew up, before social media.
Yeah.
How long did Farm Club last? Was that a couple of years?
It lasted almost 2 years. And the thing was, it was doing really well. There was a blessing and a curse that came together with Farm Club. Now, Jimmy and Doug Morris. Now, Doug Morris, of course, was one of the heads of Universal. Used to run like Atlantic Records. He's been in the music business, for years. Yeah, he wrote like 60s hits for people. Jimmy Iovine, of course, has produced everybody from Springsteen to Tom Petty to, we know, the U2.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Monster.
Yeah, these guys, they're both so great, and they decide they're going to do something. They're going to have this, this opportunity to help out young artists. And I remember that the idea was to create social media when it didn't exist yet. So, it was Napster was the only thing that was about to explode at the same time. But what I meant by the blessing and the curse was they had a choice. They were either going to do a deal with a TV network or they were going to come out swinging. And the idea was they bought the hour on USA Network, which was it 11 to midnight? I think it was 11 to midnight, which is crazy on a Monday night, right?
Okay, it's on Monday.
But WWF Raw and War were right before it, and they were the highest rated hours on cable, period. Mm-hmm. So we had a lead-in of a 15 share, which, it's incredible. So bottom line was we ended up being, for a while, the third highest rated cable show. Just by association, by being before. So that was great at first and a genius idea.
Yeah.
But what we never ever expected to happen was that TNN outbid USA on WWF, WWE as it would become. They outbid them and we lost our lead-in. So we were doing that. We had WWF for a year where they were the two highest rated hours. It was literally wrestling's biggest years on cable. And all of a sudden, we have like some bad 80s movies reruns like on a Monday night before us, and our rating it dropped considerably. At the same time, although it was still people were still watching it and taping it. But, when you don't have a 15%, 15 share lead-in, it changes the game a bit. And I remember there was a picture of me and Dre on stage on the cover of the New York Times business section because when Farm Club launched for the first year, it was selling a ton of CDs. It was really, affecting the music market, music business. So,
yeah.
But when that happened, at the same time, all the .coms became .bombs, in Silicon Valley. And one of the first music companies to go public to try to do an IPO was called Artist Direct. And my friend Mark Geiger ran the company. He's still killing it. He's like the head of all touring for William Morris. Mm-hmm. So he's like in charge of, works with so many artists. And he's a brilliant, brilliant guy, very visionary. But when that happened, and all of a sudden the music business saw, oh wow, Artist Direct came out, and then it tanked the stock. All of a sudden they were starting to pull out the money on it too. So we went from shooting at Universal Studios with a rotating stage and everything to shooting on Universal City Walk for the last 3 or 4 months of the show. So it was, unfortunately, was not to last, but it was a great show and it was a great idea and it was way ahead of its time.
It was, yeah. I still love it. So also, I'm going to talk about this book you wrote.
Okay, great.
How long did it take you to write a book? That's awesome.
It took, Scott, thank you for saying that. It took me a year to write that book, and I remember it was a crazy year of my life because I knew what I wanted to do a book. It was Danny Goldberg, who's a guy who is legendary. He was Led Zeppelin's PR person, so he was on a plane with Zeppelin, from Houses of the Holy to the end. He managed Nirvana. He managed a bunch of people. Danny always told me I should write a book. He was like, man, he goes, you got so many stories, you got to write a book. And I'd hear that from other musicians and stuff and friends. And then I finally sat down with Danny because I was, at this point in time, I remember, I think had gone through a breakup or something that was leaning heavily on my heart, you know what I mean? And I was seeing Danny, he's like, I think it's time for you to write that book. So we ended up pitching the idea, and Danny and I came up with basically a proposal for the book itself. I wrote it, and then Danny just edited it for me, but he introduced me to his literary agent, this woman, Laura Nolan, who did John Fogerty's books, but she did chef's books. It's not just musicians. And he said, I'm warning you, she's the kind of person, she doesn't think she can sell your book. She's going to like, she's not going to be, I'm out like in 10 seconds, not even going to bother. But she liked the idea of the book. And then I ended up writing, my co-writer on the book is a guy named Mitchell Cohen, who he and I both worked at Columbia Records, and we did A&R, and we signed bands. That's what we did. So, but he was a writer before that for Cream and Rolling Stone. And
cool.
All, like Circus and a bunch of other Bat magazines. So
yeah,
he's a pretty legendary rock writer. So it made sense because we also got each other because he's a music head like you and I are. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that thing. So it took me a year to write it, and it was we spent many like hours just talking, and then we record and we would transcribe everything. Then we cut it down. We look at how certain things work
so
together.
You must be sick of it after like a year, because you probably had to read it and then.
Well, you know what? I wasn't. Here's the thing that was crazy about it. My life was going so much stuff was happening at the time that I was very happy when they figured out that we were finished with it. But it was.
Oh yeah.
But I was so grateful to have the opportunity to be able to tell your story.
Absolutely.
And from a very interesting.
I love it.
I appreciate that, Scott. And when I appreciate when I'll meet other journalists or people who say to me, I like your book because it's not like a bragging thing. It's more like you're such a music fan. It's real. It's not, you know what I mean?
I love how in your book, I listened to the audio version, by the way, which I love that there's an audio copy.
Yeah.
But I love how each, like the 70s, you're like, this is the 70s album you have to listen to. And you give a whole list.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember them. And my favorite part of the book is when you go, if you don't know who the Jam is, put this book down.
Yeah. Go listen to them right now.
Yeah.
Which is great. Because I love the Jam and the Clash. I mean, I love so many, the Police,
right.
Those bands at that period of time, they were all like exploding alive. But it was cool. Just, I think, and that, and part of what you're saying, and I appreciate you like that, was one of the things we used to do in 120 minutes, and we wouldn't tell the bosses. This is the best part, because they would never stay up that late, right? So the crazy thing was, we'd go, well, what are we going to do at the end of the show? I'm like, so I started this whole thing where I would play a classic video from somebody from years before, and then I would just tell you why you should know about that band. You know what I mean? And whether it was the Ramones or T-Rex, you know what I mean, or whatever it was. I'm just using those as examples. But by this time, even if and we never told the bosses. I would do this whole thing, tell you which albums were the best ones to buy, and then we would run the credits over the video. And they never knew it, so we got away with it to do it. But we wanted to do, which was pretty cool.
Smart.
But it wasn't, but it was also because we wanted to turn people on to cool things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just.
I love it.
I was just very grateful to have that opportunity to do it, and I think that's the thing that's really cool about what you're doing right now. I mean, interviewing the people that you like, and musicians that you love, and I think it's just.
Thank you.
It's so cool.
That means a lot to me. Yeah.
It's great.
I look up to you, so this is...
Oh, no, actually, Scott, man, I'm very flattered and humbled by it, but I appreciate it. I really do, man. So I'm glad you liked the book, too. It was very honest. It was very open,
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be a drunk or drug-a-log or anything like that, because there were certainly periods of my life, where,
Yeah.
where things got crazy and out of hand. But
you leave the gossip out, because there's certain times you're like, I'm not going to mention this person's name. And...
Well, what it is? I checked with everybody in that book.
That's good.
From Marilyn Manson to Billy Idol, to the U2 guys.
So your book was kind of opposite from Sammy Hagar's. When
Yeah.
he was talking about Van Halen, and it's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
But...
it's crazy. I love both eras of Van Halen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I actually do love them both. And I'm a huge Sammy Hagar fan. Like, I love Montrose, his first band, that he had. And it's funny, a lot of people like to talk shit about Eddie, but I think Eddie's great. I love Eddie Van Halen. And he was always so
turn
cool
around
to me.
you guys' life for him.
Was he? He was so fucking cool to me. I remember we were at 5150, and I don't know if it's in the book or not, because I can't remember. There's so many stories, but where I'm like at 5150 and I go ask him to use the toilet. And remember this? So I go and I'm sitting on the toilet at Eddie Van Halen's studio.
Oh, I know
It's
this.
like,
the
story.
Yeah.
And I look under the toilet paper dispenser, and there's a 1/4-inch jack holder. I'm like, oh, that's right, shit. So I go, Eddie, you riff when you're on a bowl? And he goes, yeah, man, I do. So like, you could plug in your guitar and sit on the shitter and fucking play riffs, and it would go right into the studio in the next room, which was pretty amazing. And Eddie was Eddie Van Halen was a stickler for like his mastering of his records. He mastered them like 50 times. And I mean, he played me some versions. I'm like, that one's as good as the last one. But he's just a great guy. I love him, you know.
So you know, the 90s is where like the late 80s, early 90s, when Nirvana and the whole grunge thing happened, that was huge on me, right?
Yeah.
So as a kind of a fan, what was it like having artists like all the grunge, like Alice in Chains, Nirvanas, and all those bands, Smashing Pumpkins? What was that like at that time? Because I mean, it was just...
Well, it was so exciting. You know, I mean, it was exciting because it was just like one band after another. They were coming out and they were making just some of the greatest music at the time. And it was an interesting kind of return to form where alternative music became also rock again in a sense. It was already rock, but it was like fusing some of the things that were strong about classic rock and hard rock back in with alternative music. So it was ripe to happen. I'll tell you an interesting story about Jane's Addiction, because I will never forget that I was DJing doing a radio show, and I remember one of the guys who was there working at the station was like, "What are you playing that shit for?" And I'm like, "You don't understand, man." I go, "This band is going to be huge." I go, "And this is great stuff." And there was that's when there was a divide between the people that just liked the more twangy, like REM, and who I love very much, of course. But I mean, them and the Smiths and things like, where there was a period where those people that were more into things that were like Byrds influenced and that kind of stuff really were not liking Jane's Addiction or Soundgarden or any of those kind of bands. But then eventually, like, everything just started to explode, and it was
and the
right
hair metal
for
was
the taking.
just dying off right there, right?
Yeah, it was one of those things where, you know, it's what happens in any genre of music. I think by that time it was like already a third and fourth tier hair metal bands, you know. So they're still signing everything they can sign, and some of the bands are good and some are not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some are really talented and great at what they do, and you know. But it was definitely a big change. It was like, you know, it was a changeover at that period of time. It was happening. And I think a lot of that started with Guns N' Roses too. I think Guns were so important that when they came about, even though they were still kind of on a crease where there was the, you know, the hair metal thing that was going on, and I'm not disrespecting it in any way. I'm just saying that, but they were like a little more dangerous and dirtier, and you know, that kind of thing. So when Guns N' Roses came out, people were like, "What the fuck is this?"
I love in your book when you talk about Guns N' Roses and you're like talking about the gatekeepers of what music gets out there on the radio and in MTV world. I've never heard that. It's so interesting, you know. If like you have one person in the record company that believes in your band, that can, you know, make or break you, you know.
It really can. It makes all the difference in the world, you know. And sometimes it's having worked in a record company, and you know, I was as an A&R guy at Columbia there, you know, where I came in as a senior director and got promoted to vice president, but. What I learned very quickly is that timing is everything, and also rallying the people at the record label, at a label that big. You've got to kind of really, you got to be a cheerleader in there for your artist. And even that doesn't guarantee that you're going to become a priority there, which is a sad situation. It's the truth, you know, because how many records do we love that we know were great, that the band never quite got as far as I thought they should go, you know? On the other hand, there were the opportunities where with the buzz clips and the stuff at MTV to power those rotations, I know I helped a lot of bands that way, and we all did there. You know, I don't want to take full credit as myself, but we all did. But I mean, that's a really interesting thing about working, you know, with Guns N' Roses. It was so important because at the time, there's a story about Sherry Howell, you know, who worked with us at MTV, and how she danced on the table because she said, "You got to add that record."
Yeah, I'll dance on the
table. I'll dance on the table tonight. And they said, "We'll add Welcome to the Jungle if you dance on the table."
Wow.
And that changed her dancing on the table. Changed the trajectory of the GNR guys' lives forever.
Those guys,
just because you know what I mean. She
needs like a percent of the.
Yeah, I mean, she's so cool. She's it's funny, like, you know, I worked with so many great people.
Do you still talk to her now?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm in touch with her through social media and stuff. But like her and Tabitha Soren and all the people that I worked with over there, Kurt Loder. And
I read Kennedy's book, so it was really interesting hearing her take on everything.
Kennedy's cool. You know, she's great. I mean, I loved working with her, and she was very kind to me in her book. And but you know, she was great too. Like, it was funny. I mean, we were like, Kennedy was brought over from K-Rock in L.A. So was Lewis. And they all came over with Andy, and it, you know, it changed what was going on at that period of time. But I getting back to what you were saying about Guns N' Roses, I'll just bring up that it was such an important part, but it was one of the things that kind of shifted it even more so that it would open the door to a lot of the things that were grunge and guitar heavy, like the Soundgardens and Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam and of course Nirvana still had that punk edge to them as well. But that from Guns to Jane's to that. And it's funny, Tom Morello always says to me, he goes, I don't think people realize how important Jane's Addiction were in that. Because you think about them, but people don't realize how they were a big part of that transition as well, with changing things, which I thought was
true.
Cool,
Yeah,
you know?
100%.
Yeah.
So now you're working on, you did Paradise City, the documentary on Showtime.
Well, you know what's crazy? Paradise City is really cool. It's a new TV show. My friend Ash Avildsen, who he owns Sumerian Records and Sumerian Films. He did a movie called American Satan that was on Showtime. You probably saw it. And I remember later on he was talking maybe the Satan word was too strong. But it was like the thing was the Satan, but the guy who played Satan was Malcolm McDowell.
Oh, was it? Oh, yeah.
Malcolm McDowell from Clockwork Orange and everything else. It was so cool, and it's a good movie. Ash did a great job. The movie's great. So what he did was he decided he was going to do this other TV show called Paradise City, which is fantastic, and it's about these two bands and these relationships that go on, and it's going to be a limited series, meaning it's probably about 6 to 8 episodes. Oh, cool! But it's so cool because it's got I loved it because I got to work with Drea De Matteo from Sopranos and Sons of Anarchy, and Mark Boone Jr. from Sons of Anarchy, and this guy Reese from Entourage who played Billy Walsh. Worked with all of those guys in it, and it was just so much fun. Because once again, I'm playing myself, which I'm cool with. I'm always good with it. I'm grateful. I'm like, you know what? I'll take it. It's cool, Like Portlandia, and then I was in Dennis Leary's Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, which was on FX. But always as myself. And while I was shooting, the crazy thing about doing that show, which was, it's just an amazing show. I mean, I can't wait till it's done and people get to see Paradise City. I think Ash is a genius. It's funny, his dad is a famous director, you know what I mean? But Ash is like a totally self-made man, but his father directed Rocky, Karate Kid, and Lean on Me. Oh, so, okay. I mean, if you did all that, right,
Yes.
But Ash, he wasn't one of these, Hollywood kids who were everything was handed to him. He really worked for everything he got, man, promoting local shows, doing all that stuff. He's a real deal.
That's amazing that he did Rocky and Karate Kid.
Yeah. His dad did,
massive,
And now he's, he as a director is doing, he's doing really well. So this show is, I'm very proud of what we did. But of course, I almost didn't make it in the show itself because of my car accident, right? So I was shooting a documentary about the show.
And that's why
behind the scenes. You were right though. You were absolutely right because I remember I was talking to you about it and saying that I was doing this documentary. So while I was doing the documentary side, I was also in 6 scenes as myself, and it almost didn't happen because I was supposed to shoot the day after I got hit by a car on December 4th, which I will.
Yes.
I mean, so 2 weeks earlier, there's a rainstorm, and it doesn't rain that often in LA. I mean, although it has been a lot lately, but so they were like, well, we can't shoot on the Santa Monica Pier. So I get a call from Ash, the director, who goes, "Hey Matt," he goes, "I hope you can stay. I hope you're focused and you can make sure have all your lines for because we're shooting them all tomorrow." So we shot all 6 scenes, and and we even one that he wrote for me and Bella Thorne to do, literally while I was in the car going over there, and we just knocked it out. I read it 3 times and I lived it, but I mean, it almost didn't happen because I was scheduled to shoot December 4th. Now on December 3rd, I was crossing the street in Hollywood, California, by my house, and I've crossed that street 1,000 times because you'll go over. There's a place called the 101 Coffee Shop. It's right by Hollywood Tower, which is a pretty legendary building there, where Humphrey Bogart and Marilyn Monroe lived years ago, and Disney designed the Tower of Terror after their elevator. The whole building is the actual. It's like a replica of that. So I'm coming across the street, and it's usually pretty cool, and it's crazy, but you have to really pick and choose when you go. Nobody's coming to the left. I get to the 3rd lane. I look out of the corner of my eye. I see a car gunning towards me, and my immediate reaction was to jump up So I got hit in the leg. I broke my leg in 2 places. Compound fracture is when the bone actually comes out of your skin. So it broke in half. I went up through the windshield, because I was thrown over, because I went to jump. So which is probably the thing that saved my life, because I could have been under the car.
Yeah, if you didn't jump, yeah.
So I went through the windshield and it split my head open, completely, and tore part of my ear off. And then I was conscious for the whole thing, so I bounced off the hood of the car. And then she finally broke because she was doing about 40, and I literally was thrown 15 to 20 feet, and I was laying in the middle of the road, and people were coming over, and a lot of people
didn't knock you out. You're conscious the whole time.
Yeah, and I've heard it said that if you are conscious, it's better for your motor skills are losing brain. So I don't know for a fact, but I was awake for the entire thing. When you're hit by a car, it's really funny how one of the things you'll remember is I remember the smell of the metal.
Oh.
Like the engine, because I went up over it, so obviously the engine was hot. So I remember the smell of the metal. So weird, right? And then I bounced off I remember, I was just covered in blood. My head was completely split open, and they told me I was lucky to be alive. They asked me if I could feel my toes, and I could. They put me in a neck brace. I went to the hospital. As I've told you, it was cool because the surgeon there in the Cedars-Sinai Trauma Center was a fan. He watched 120 Minutes too, and Headbangers Ball. He loved the MTV rock shows over the years. So he was some guy goes to him, oh, you know what? You want to staple his head? It'll be faster. And I need to see him go, no. I watch this guy. I watched him growing up on TV. I like him. I'm going to sew it. So he took the time, talked about rock the whole time. It was really cool. And I'm just grateful to be alive.
Yeah,
it's a miracle.
That you're alive.
It's a miracle. It was everywhere, TMZ, had me on there for 3 nights straight, they were running the story and they broke it. And then it went from there to People, all these other places it went. And I was just grateful to be alive. I look at it like that. And I'm really grateful for the music community and all the social media community and people that reached out and were really supportive. Because, it's kind of a crazy thing when that happens. You just, and I look pretty beat up.
We're glad you're alive.
I'm grateful to be here.
It's wild because I talked to you a couple of days before that happened, and then you got ran over. I'm like, I haven't heard from Matt. What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. What's funny? I love that you said that, Scott, because there's another woman that I know I used to work with at MTV who does a bunch of big charity stuff, and she was reaching out to me to meet me. She told her friend, she goes, I don't know, man. I wonder if I pissed him off. She goes, no.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I haven't heard from him a few days.
No, and that was it. It was just
busy getting run over by a car.
Just busy getting run over by a car. Like I said, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful I'm here every day. And just like you, we love music so much. We're our heart and soul. It's the kind of thing that, it's a part of you. Just like the musicians that we love and listen to, the songwriters. I think there's an amazing community in that love for music and
absolutely
and devoting something like you're doing right now with good company. I think that's just so what it's about, because if you love it so much, you've got to do it. To bring your passion to it,
Yeah.
And I think it's really.
Well, you're a role model, man. I look up to you. So.
Well, it is so kind of you to say,
Scott.
Thank you,
man.
I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you so much.
really great. I hope you got everything that you needed, man.
It was
cool.
Yes.
There's some crazy stories. And the Marilyn Manson one, like the one in the book. Remember the
Yes.
I just will always never forget that. And it's also in that book, Louder Than Hell, Oral History of Metal.
Yeah, I got to read that. I've heard about it.
Yeah, he just looks at me and goes, Pinfield, you scare us. And that's when you knew I was pretty out of control at the time.
That's great.
Hey, it was the 90s. We were feeling the music and we were partying very, very hard. But I'm grateful to be here.
Matt, thank you for being there,
Scott,
brother.
thank you so much for having
me.
Me.
Brother.
Thanks for
Much
what
respect.
you do, man.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.